That was also, I'd had a big life change. I'd gone through 2 years of being very, very ill. Um, I had bipolar disorder. It was undiagnosed at the time. I didn't know what it was, but I'd spent 2 years just being non-functional. And when I crawled back from that, I was just, I was in a very emotional place, I guess, and that wanted to come out in music, I think, wanted to come out in songs. So I guess those two things, the fact that that it wasn't as big a deal to record something,
Mm.
and that I just sort of needed to at that time.
And well, bipolar would have been a lifelong condition,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you sought help or guidance, or you got it diagnosed then following years and years of it being undiagnosed. What was
Yeah.
that like? How does that happen? Like,
Well, I didn't know. Like as growing up, I didn't know what it was.
mm,
Uh, I just thought it was me. That's most undiagnosed bipolars. They just think this is the kind of person I am. I start things and I don't finish them. I get real excited about something and then decide that it's crap.
mm,
Uh, I'm very social, and then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, I'm not social and I don't want to see anybody. There's just something that's who I am. I'm an
mm,
asshole, you know. um, and in fact, you learn that your whole life. You learn that that's who you are. And I think a lot of bipolar treatment, like in bipolar, the primary line of treatment is medication. It really has to be. It's a neurological disease, and it's genetic, and you have to manage it with medication. But you need talk therapy too. And for me, the main reason was to understand what had happened and how it shaped my behavior and the way I think about myself and about about everything, really. So, as I was growing up, I wasn't a type 1 bipolar who went crazy manic. I'm type 2, who goes from being normal or maybe somewhat hypomanic to long periods of depression. So it was, there wasn't a big red flag sticking out. And certainly not when I was a kid. There was a much less awareness of things like that. My folks sent me to psychiatrists when I was a kid just because they thought I wasn't very happy. I didn't find out 2 years later that that's why they sent me. At the time, it was just like, oh, I got another stupid thing I got to do. And plus, I got to leave school for 2 hours to go do it. And it did absolutely no good. They had no clue what was going on with me.
mm.
It's just a lot of nonsense. And so I didn't even think in terms of that had anything to offer me. And as time went on, I got, I tried to make myself a better person through sort of natural medicine and spiritual practices, which, are a huge part of my life, really. But there was always this thing that I was fighting, and it got worse and worse. It started out very physical, like becoming allergic to every kind of food, just getting brain fog all the time, and getting really bad depressions. This really most started after I moved to LA. Moving to LA was great. I immediately started having a good time and making good contacts and having a good, but physically I was a mess. And I went to a number of naturopathic doctors to try to figure out what was wrong. And they all thought, well, you've got chronic fatigue. And they would try to treat it with homeopathic remedies or with herbs or with this or with that. None of it did anything. And one doctor suggested I take Prozac, which was a new thing at the time. He gave me a book to read, Listening to Prozac. And I thought, I read it, and it's very pro Prozac. And in the book, you see people who take it who are not necessarily depressed or don't think they're depressed, but they just start feeling better. And it details all the way they do feel better and are more productive or creative. Where I said, oh man, where has this been all my life? So I started taking it, and it worked for a while. It worked. And then at one point, I started noticing this cycling happening because I hadn't been given any kind of mood stabilizer to go with it. You can't really just give a bipolar an antidepressant because it'll tend to kindle them, into cycling. So that started to happen, and I got worried about that. And also, I started hearing a lot of negative things about Prozac there. I mean, there was a huge backlash to Prozac that came after the listening to Prozac years. People were having a hard time getting off it, or people would come off it and feel suicidal. I think it was the first of the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and it was kind of a new thing, and people didn't understand it. In the book, Listening to Prozac, the guy says there are no known withdrawal effects. Complete bullshit. They're terrible withdrawal effects if you just stop it. Anyway, I was hearing all of these negative things about Prozac. I figured I'd stop it, and I did. And that's when things got really bad. And why exactly? At the time, I thought, well, Prozac has destroyed me. It has ruined my life. But what I think really happened was that it kindled the bipolar, because I wasn't taking a mood stabilizer, and then stopping it also kindled a cycling thing. And I just got in worse shape than I've ever been in my life. Just absolute bottom of the barrel depression. And it went on for months and months and years. And then after about a year that I would say I would get these brief periods of hypomania. And I asked one of my naturopathic doctors, because I felt like I don't want to take any more psychiatric drugs. It's the devil. I don't want to do that. So I went to naturopathic doctors and tried all these remedies again. And I asked one guy, I said, this is what's happening to me. Am I manic depressive? He said, no, there's no such thing. No, it's just toxicity of this and blah, blah, blah. So I just kept trying to do that. I moved out of LA for most of the time. I was in a cabin up in the woods, just hiding from the world. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And then it got to the point where I just sort of hit bottom. I got an audition to go in and audition to be the host of a comedy show. And I went in, I felt horrible. I told my agent, listen, I'm in terrible shape. She said, listen, this is really going to be a show. You got to go in and do this. I couldn't. I went in there and I sucked. And I'm walking out just feeling horrible, and also thinking to myself, The Daily Show, what kind of stupid name is that for a show? And who knows? Maybe if I'd have been healthy, we never would have had Jon Stewart, which would have been.
I was just going to say, we're talking Jon Stewart's Daily Show here, right?
Yeah, which would have been a great loss to mankind. I don't think I would have got that part anyway, but that was the bottom for me. And I asked my friend Dee Marcus, I call my fairy godmother, is sort of one of the leading lights of improv comedy in LA. I just told her my situation. She said, I know a guy you need to see. And she introduced me to the guy who became my psychiatrist and has been since then, and who literally saved my life. Within half an hour, he diagnosed me. He figured out what had been going on. I showed him charts that I had been keeping for about a year, these graphs of my moods. And you can see,